Hi, everyone. Welcome to panel 4, Revaluing Buddhist Adaptation in the Modern World. First of all, a warm welcome to all our panelists. Thank you very much for the brilliant recorded videos, and also here to join everyone in this wonderful panel. And also thank all the participants, and most of all, thank Nantian for organizing such an amazing event. Before we start, maybe I will just have some housekeeping to read out the Zoom norms for everyone. So for the chat box, feel free to use the chat box for the audience. The chat box is only for questions. If you have any questions from our panel, please type in there and our team will start to pick up your questions and I'll deliver to the panelists to answer your questions. Please keep your questions succinct. If you have comments, please, especially about the organization of the symposium, please save them for the symposium survey, which will be available to you by the end of the session. For panelists, please be mindful with pronouns. If you see that participants' preferred pronouns is included in their Zoom name, please use that. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, that's the housekeeping part. And now let's formally kickstart our panel. First of all, thanks again for Dr. Jens Reinke, Dr. Jonathan Mair, and Dr. Moderator Chiu. And thank you also Joey Yo for joining us, all the experts in their field from very different aspects, different industries, different research. So maybe let's first start with a slightly more personal question. So what we are going to do in this panel is that we will have a few questions that we think will be interesting to everyone. And then we will open up to the audience question after about 20 minutes or so. So I would love to keep this relatively casual. It's really a lot of sharing your thoughts and brainstorming and see what to do for us to do, especially related to adaptation of Buddhism in the modern world. So first of all, I would like to ask the first question is that why do you personally feel enthusiastic or passionate about this topic? Maybe I'll first share mine briefly. It is because my recent 2 chapters of my career, the first one, the previous one, I was an MBA educator at AGSM, University of New South Wales. And I have been trying to bring in Buddhist practice into my own MBA teaching, for example, mindfulness, meditation. And I realized there's a lot of challenges doing that. For example, before I go into the classroom, I need to remind myself, don't use the word Buddhism, otherwise I may get into trouble in that context of an MBA school education, but it is Buddhist teaching. So I have a lot of noises in my mind, like how should I present this to my students? Because I know it's great for them. And the second chapter is that after I left the academia, I became a founder of an internet company, Kintell. So the name itself, Kintell, K stands for kindness, Intel stands for intelligence, is a platform for people to share their knowledge and experience with each other via video chat. So even the name itself is informed by Buddhism, kindness. But when I try to bring Buddhist principle into an internet product, a digital product, there's also a lot of challenges. For example, internet product, they try to sort of make people addict, right? In a way, they try to make users keep coming back, which is in conflict with mindfulness. So I find myself in a conflict, the dilemma of these 2 worlds. And I keep thinking, how can we adapt Buddhist wisdom into the modern world, into technology product? So just briefly share my story with you that I'm super passionate about this topic and learning from all of you. Maybe I'll pass on to Jens to share a bit of your personal reason.
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, well, first, I want to also thank all the organizers, of course, for Guangshan, Nantian, and Venerable Joey and Grace for putting up this wonderful conference. It's really very, very professional. I'm very impressed. Okay, just introduce myself. My name is Jens Reinke. I'm an assistant professor for religious studies at University of the West and director for the Institute for the Study of Humanistic Buddhism. So this means the topic is, of course, the topic of our panel is very much related to my research, right? My research specialty in general is on modern and contemporary Buddhist religiosities in Sinophone societies, meaning in China, Taiwan, but also Singapore, and of course also outside of Asia. And of course, Buddhist traditions had to adapt quite a little in the last 100 years. And yeah, that's why I'm very much passionate about the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens. Can I please invite Jonathan to share with us where did the passion come from? Oh, Jonathan, I think you're muted. Very too polite on Zoom.
Sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Jane. And yeah, thank you to Venerable Joe and to Grace and to all the organizers. I think this is a wonderful outcome of the crisis situation that we've had over the past 18 months, that we can have this kind of international conference now with such wide participation. I can see there are 111 participants in this room who will be all over the world, and that's really a wonderful outcome. So I'm very happy to be here. For me, my background is that I studied as a social anthropologist. I trained as an ethnographic researcher, and I was always fascinated by the effect of culture on people and the way in which cultures meet and mix, and the way in which individuals are capable of understanding themselves as being part of different cultures at the same time, and how they think about that. So as a social anthropologist, that's really central to the kind of research that I did. I started doing research in northern China, in Inner Mongolia, on Tibetan Buddhism as practiced by Mongolians in China. So it was already very intercultural. And later I went on to do ethnographic research with Foguan Shan in London, in Taiwan, in Paris, and in other places. And I found that really fascinating because, of course, Foguan Shan is a very intercultural, international organization, but also it has really thoughtful ideas and practical ideas about the ways in which cultures affect people, and the way in which people are capable of moving between cultures. In other words, adaptation, exactly this topic. Those ideas are similar, but not the same as the ideas that you find in academic social sciences and social anthropology in particular. So I feel, as a social scientist, I've been able to learn a lot from Foguan Shan, both by observing it practically, how it works, but also from the theory of social adaptation and cultural adaptation developed by Master Chiu.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So it's from the cultural perspective and the social perspective. May I invite Melody to share with us briefly your story and why you care about this topic?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you. The reason why I want to choose this panel, because I would like to talk about my personal research background. My research focuses on Vinaya rule, which that is the monastic rule, which have been established 2,500 years ago. So that I need to explore contemporary Buddhism, monks and nuns adaptation when they observe the rule. So without the adaptation, I think current monks and nuns must meet the difficulty when they observe the rule. So I think my personal research issue is greatly related to this panel topic. So I think I can share my data and my research finding with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melody. And also, Joey, please share with us your personal story and why you're here.
Thanks, Jane, and all panelists, and also acknowledging the great work of the organizing committee led by Venerable Chiu for this symposium. So I'm Joey here, the given name for this life. currently the exec business partner to the CEO of Zen Energy. Zen stands for zero emissions now, not in the future, but now. The part of the team that actually resonated strongly with me is the word adaptation, similar to Jonathan and Melody who mentioned earlier. And in the last 2,500 years, we have seen waves of transmission and integration of the Buddhist teachings across the world, from India to China to East Asia, India to Southeast Asia, thereafter to all the Western countries. And this divergence become important to reach out to humanity, which is diverse in culture, language, and traditions. But of course, with divergence comes challenges in discussing differences and foster unity. But I believe that the Buddhist communities across the world can celebrate this diversity alongside with other beliefs and religions as well, while unite together in our Buddha nature, that is the potential of all of us that can be awakened and to be enlightened beings that's filled with compassion and wisdom.
Cool. Thank you very much, Joey. And we would love to hear more about your story from the energy industry as well, because it related to everyone and also is part of the crisis as well that's related to the symposium. So I would love to have kind of like more debates in this session. So I think we are here in such a high trust environment and we can voice out what we think. That's why I would like to start with a slightly controversial question to kick off the panel. So my question for all our panelists is, because the keyword of this panel is adaptation, will adaptation lead to eventually losing the tradition? And does it matter if we lose some aspects of Buddhist tradition in the modern world during the adaptation process? So I would like to give a very quick example as why I would like to make this the first question. So during my teaching, during my MBA teaching, I have been trying to integrate mindfulness into our daily education for very busy executives. And because I know they really need it and they love it. But every time when I try to introduce mindfulness to them, I have to attach a business goal for them, a purpose, why you should do it. It makes you more creative, more productive, and you generate more business outcome. But my own Buddhist learning is that the practice of mindfulness is to lead to a more enlightened mind, or we should not be thinking about improving my own productivity or business so that I practice mindfulness. That's why I feel like, should I not say to my students that this is make you more productive? But if I don't say it, it doesn't seem legit for me to introduce the practice into the business school in the classroom, or report to my dean that why I introduce mindfulness to my students. So that's why I'm thinking there's an argument that it's okay to let go of some formats in the tradition as far as we keep the spirit. However, some traditions are attached to the spirit, or the spirit is embedded to the tradition. If we let go more and more of the formats, we will eventually also lose the spirit, which is the core of the whole practice. So I would like to start with this. And would any panelists would like to first comment on this? Or Melody? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you, Jen. I think first I would like to say how to define the Buddhist tradition. I think everyone has different definition and interpretation. Secondly, I think if we want to keep the Buddhist tradition without any adaptation or flexibility, perhaps it's not good for Buddhist continuity and propagation. And as long as we follow the key principle of Buddhist tradition, I mean the key principle, I think in the modern world, it is fine. Because if we look at history, and some traditions may lose more or less based on the human development. Yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melody. So your view is sort of like it's okay to let go of tradition, right? Also, how you define tradition is also quite subjective as well. and traditions has been lost anyway, right? As we look at human history. And we have to accept it in a way. It's also Buddhist teaching to accept, to be mindful of what it is now, instead of attaching good or bad to it, right? Anyone would like to, Joey?
Yeah, just jump in here. I guess to write on to what Melody has mentioned, if we fully embrace the concept of emptiness or impermanence in the teachings of the Buddha, then we don't see adaptation as losing traditions. Instead, we transcend the concept of gained or lost. We focus on the goal of the Buddha's teaching, customizing the practice to meet the needs of the modern world. Just as evolution that diversifies biological species, emptiness diversifies our karmic paths. In fact, it is an opportune time to celebrate this diversity of various traditions and schools in Buddhism, all grounded with a common purpose of elevating humanity's dukkha and facilitate liberation and enlightenment. We see this happening in Fo Guangshan community. We see it happening in Nantian Institute as well, where we celebrate and cultivate with all schools, with all religions. And I see this diversity as much needed and deserve to be embraced and celebrated. It goes to building strong relationship and affinities. And if we start to draw lines extensively, affinities are affected, and our Bodhisattva journey might be less effective in the long future. And it is possible that over time, certain paths might see themselves being less extensive in terms of notice and fellowship. But again, these are driven by the causes and conditions of that particular time. So for me as Bodhisattva wannabe, it's probably good for us to see through this conditioned phenomena, write on them wisely in helping sentient beings, but not to be caught by gain or loss, up or down. It's just like what is mentioned in the Heart Sutra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness.
Thank you very much, Joey, for the very deep insight. So, Jonathan or Jens, any comment from you? Yes, Jens.
Well, thank you. I think we have to move away from this binary of modernity versus tradition.
Yeah.
Because of course, I mean, those are not static things, right? I mean, modernity is like kind of multiple. There's modern societies all over Asia, Europe, the Americas, and they have, of course, commonalities, but they, of course, have their differences. And the same for history. Like there is no one static form of history or tradition, but of course, Buddhist traditions have always adapted over the years and over the centuries. And Humanistic Buddhism itself is a modern actualization of the Chinese Buddhist tradition. And of course, you can already see adaptations from or differences between Venerable Taishu and Venerable Master Xingyun. Of course, it always changes and adapts to the current circumstances. And of course, also to this, I mean, Humanistic Buddhism is a global phenomenon. So of course, there's it has to adapt to different societies, and it does so to different degrees. But of course, on the other hand, we also want to value tradition. And so I understand your concern, and I think that is something you have to, it's like a case-by-case thing, so to speak. There's nothing to be answered with one broad answer. But I don't think there's anything to fear here. So you don't have to be scared of losing tradition. That's another danger that I see as of now.
Thank you very much, Jens. Any further comment, Jonathan?
Sure, yeah. This is one of the areas that, as a social scientist, I think Fo Guangshan thinks very clearly and well about. You know, social anthropology is a discipline that's always been concerned with the relationship between international metropolitan cultures that are associated with universities, for example, and local smaller cultures that may not have the power and the privilege that the metropolitan cultures have. And we've always had a great anxiety about the relationship between those different cultures. So like other academics, there's been a long debate about the relationship between relativism and universalism. And mainly social anthropologists have said, well, you can't really judge between cultures. You shouldn't try to impose your own views that you have absorbed from your culture on what other people are doing, but you have to just respect what they're doing. And other people have said, well, no, there are actually universal values which we share, which transcend culture. And for me, the genius of the Fogwanshan approach is to say, well, actually, there are universals. There is what Master Xing Yun would refer to as the original intent of the Buddha, the content of universal human reason, compassion. These things are found everywhere, but everywhere they're always clothed in local practices, in local culture, and in the social relationships that allow those universal dynamics to play out and take effect. So, you know, when you're looking at mindfulness in business, for example, you know, my understanding of the Fogwanshan approach would be to say, well, you can still pursue those universal goods which mindfulness allows you to develop and to uncover in the context of a business relationship and business practices that have other goals in mind as well, and they can be good too. So I think what I'm saying is really agreeing with Jens that it's not a question of holding on to the concrete specifics of the practice, but focusing on the original intent.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So yeah, I agree with all the panelists. During these are the dilemmas I have during the earlier years when I try to introduce mindfulness. During the later years, I realized actually it's not that hard to translate universal Buddhist teaching into business language as well. And gradually, the students, they will also look for them themselves. Some of them stay after the class and ask me questions, and then I can recommend some books to them that's more directly related to Buddhism, for example. So they're not in conflict. So I think very soon we'll open up the floor to our participant questions. So I will ask one final question to all the panelists, is that during your work, what do you think is one key implication that is relevant to most of the participants today here? Is one thing that you're saying, I would like to highlight that because that will inform, maybe that will inform your daily practice or your thoughts. One thing I can share from my work is that I realized like business people or people in tech, they really need the practice of a more structural even not Buddhist practice, they don't know it's Buddhist practice, but it's a kind of structural practice that every day it brings them back to peacefulness. It's like at the moment people are working on the surface of the ocean. It's storms every day. It's a lot of information, but daily we need to come back to the bottom of the ocean. There's calmness, there's peace, there's universal teachings, so that we can recharge and again, tomorrow, we may go back to the service. So it's a daily practice. So the structural aspect of Buddhism has been really helpful to my own practice in business. Yeah, maybe I will invite Joey. You're smiling. I think you already have your answer in mind. One thing that you would like all the participants to take away from your work.
I think it's the message of starting now. Yesterday, I hear what Professor Lancaster mentioned, start small, accumulate eventually. So in my space of working in eradicating climate change, we can't deal with it one shot. We have to start small and we accumulate our actions over time. And the key thing here is we all can do that reflection on an everyday basis, to look at our daily activities and to think about, hey, are there some things that we can start doing a change each day? And over a year is 365 wholesome changes. That's an amazing feat. And one little thing that I did yesterday while shopping at Kohl's was that I realized that now the toothbrush comes with bamboo instead of plastic. And I decided to make the change. Yes. And these are little things. On the climate change point of view, we as Australians, we hold superannuation accounts. That's a significant amount of money across collectively. We can review where we want to put the funds and invest in super funds that support climate change extensively and has declared free from coal and other polluting aspects. So that is little things that we can make. And across 365 days, that snowballs into a big, massive campaign forward. So I just want to echo the other panelists from yesterday and today as well, the message of starting now. That's why the company that I'm supporting right now, Zero Emissions Now, not in the future, but now.
Do it now, the practice part of Buddhism. Thank you very much, Joey. Maybe we'll go for Jonathan. I see a smile on your face.
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned in the recorded talk, as a social anthropologist, the main method that we use to try to understand different societies or different cultures that we're not familiar with is putting ourselves and our bodies in that culture, in that society, and interacting with other people in a practical, ongoing, everyday way. And the idea is that by doing that, we develop empathy, we develop relationships, we develop common practices that allow us to understand understand other people's viewpoints more effectively than just talking about the kind of the business end itself. And I didn't really apply that to my everyday life until I saw the same kind of practice in Foguanshan activities. For example, as an academic, I was involved in many, many conferences like this. And the typical way of organizing a conference or a seminar in the universities I was involved in was to pack everything in a day. You know, we would have so many speakers. It would be really exhausting. We were expected to sort of sit there, listen, talk, eat standing up in between the panels usually. And then when I started attending Foguanshan events, I saw how carefully the venerables and the devotees looked after the needs of the attendees as biological animals that we all are. You know, there were frequent breaks because people get tired. They would say, "Oh, does anybody need to go to the toilet?" There would be constant tea being served and constant nibbles, that kind of thing. And that just seems to me a small example of the way in which Foguanshan engages with people as on the most common universal level, people as organisms and animals. And I think by engaging with each other on that basis, understanding our daily embodied difficulties, then we can build empathy and understanding of the more difficult cultural differences.
Thank you very much for the remark. It's very insightful, Jonathan. We will move on to Jens.
Yes, sure.
See the smile on your face. Jens, you're ready.
Well, I mean, I don't know if my research is important enough to have that many implications for everybody's life in the audience, but maybe just if I
just show us how to be humble, which is an important teaching.
Well, okay, that's maybe that's something I've learned from my field work. No, but if I may get back to my presentation and the case study discussed there, something that I feel that I took from my fieldwork, from my most recent fieldwork, is the importance of intra-Buddhist cooperation. I mean, especially in these contexts that we have seen, I think, worldwide, but especially here in LA or in the US, the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes in the last year or 2 years during the pandemic, and how important it is to really, for Buddhist organizations, we are all like, you know, sometimes with ourselves and related or attached to certain communities. And now there's, I feel, kind of like a development of increased cooperation. And I think that's a very important. Of course, Foguanshan also played an important role. I mean, Hoitong also attended the memorial, amongst many, many other groups of all backgrounds. And that creates, has kind of resonated here with all, especially this of the second and later generations of Asian American Buddhists, And I think it really helps to stabilize and kind of enhance our position of Buddhist groups in a majority Christian society as the US is, and have been demolitions of temples in the last year. So I think that is something which is really important. And I hope to see more of in the future.
Thank you very much, Jens. Actually, your research will be highly relevant to our first question from the participants. So the first question from Xiu Xiang Chao. Apologies if my pronunciation is not that accurate. So Xiu Xiang said, may I please ask, how can every one of us, Buddhists, non-Buddhists, practically rebuild trust together within self and in the society amid all the differences and sometimes conflicting interests? So I think this is a question about trust. So I think nowadays, if you go to see the news media, basically most of the news is destroying trust in a way. It's not about building trust. It's about conflicts or crisis, or to catch people's eyeballs. For example, I'm a Chinese, but I can see the news media from the Chinese media or from the Australian media is basically to paint a picture that I don't see is very common. Actually, I'm not familiar with those pictures, but in the media, you can see that, which is not building trust in a way. So I think this question is very meaningful about trust, especially, for example, Jens has mentioned the anti-Asian hate crimes. And it's not just an event in person, it's also on the social media. So I'm running this internet company. So we as a team deliberately did not build the chat feature, the forum feature, to stay away from that. If you look at Twitter or Facebook, so everything that we are listening to these days, we're immersed in an environment that's hard to build trust. So is there anything we can do as, I think building trust within self is a very important comment as well from Xiu Xiang, because we have to have trust inside ourselves so that we can interact with each other to build that trust as well. So is there any comment from our panelists when it comes to the topic of trust? Is there anything we can do as an individual or when we interact with people or in the society to rebuild trust? Jonathan, please.
Yeah, I guess just really picking up on my answer to the last question in relation to social media, the fact that it's globally distributed, you can be friends on Facebook with people all over the world, you can engage in conversations across continents instantaneously now. It should be a wonderful tool. But unfortunately, because it tends to focus on the abstract, the theoretical. When you look at conversations on Facebook or Twitter, for example, it ends up being very, very polarizing. But maybe what we can do is try to build communities like the community that Venerable Jue has been building through Nantian, the Turning Points group, I think it's called, in which people just get together to share their practical, emotional experience of everyday life, and that way build empathy and understanding despite their differences.
Yeah, we build small communities with trust, and gradually they will have trust spill over to other communities and the societies in a way. Any other comments before we move on to the next question? I think this question is all about practice in a way.
Maybe just to add a quick point,
Joey, yes.
To point out that there is us in trust. If you look at the word trust, there's an us in there. And to quote an analogy, it's like two light sources or multiple light sources actually can shine brightly together, even though it is held by different people, maybe of different color, maybe of different source, maybe of different torchlight. but the light itself can come together and shine brighter if we all shine together at the same spot or holistically across the whole world. So I think we are caught in the differences in who we want to hold the torch, the color of the light, but we fail to see the fact that light actually constructively built on each other. And this symposium itself, and I think many more years to come, will be examples of how humanistic Buddhism can facilitate this collective building of light and wisdom for all of us.
May I say that, Joey, I think one of your previous lives is a poet. I would also like to just quickly share a very short story from my own teaching practice when it comes to trust, is how to face not trusting. So within the MBA classes, we have people from all types of backgrounds, and we are trying to build a safe environment for them to voice out there. And my class is international business, so there will be politics, because it's all international politics is always part of international business. So what we have a practice is that when you hear a comment that is so remote from your belief, whatever you feel, we can practice some mindfulness. Feel where's the anger. Instead of reacting within a split second, is your anger in your heart or in your stomach? And let's sit with it. And then we turn it around, and I can express to communicate my anger to the other person who caused the anger in a way to help all of us grow. So we keep practicing that every class. And one day, finally, one student from US, he said that I want to share with all of you that now I dare to say I am a supporter of Donald Trump and I support gun. So that was a very special moment in the classroom. And I'm like, okay, everyone, no matter how you feel now, let's feel where is it? Is it anger? Is it you feel nothing? You are supporting these students. So most of the class said we can feel the anger, but we are also very proud that he can actually voice this out in the classroom. Because if you don't voice it out, we can never build trust. So I think one thing we can practice is that when someone voices out something you don't like, how do we react to the other person? And I found that on these micro moments, mindfulness practice really help. So just a very little story to share with you. All right, so I think our next question is more specific to Jens from Tracy Liu from University of Cambridge. So for Dr. Jens, based on your observation, what are the necessities to emphasize humanistic under the global condition? Is the term also suitable to other Buddhist traditions? It's like very specific, quite technical, very quite scholarly. So I'll leave it to you, Jens.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. Of course, I mean, humanistic Buddhism, we have to understand it in the history, of course, of the original term, Renjian Fo Jiao. But without starting a lecture here, the main part of this idea of humanistic Buddhism is, of course, making, Buddhism, I don't want to say useful, but contribute to contemporary societies. And that is something which we, of course, find in many, many other Buddhist traditions, not just within the humanistic Buddhist tradition. So I do feel that is something, I mean, in Thailand, in Theravada traditions, of course, in those traditions here in the US. And I'm not very familiar with Buddhism in the US because I'm very new here. I just moved here a couple of months ago. But we can see like a similar impetus in all these, in the last 100 years, in all Asian like modernization movements within the different Buddhist traditions. So I think yes. The short answer is yes.
Thank you very much, Jens. The next question I have is from Jane from Wollongong. I would love for the panelists to speak to how the communities they have studied have been challenged by the plurality of local practice to adapt a universal humanism (Buddha nature) that is key to humanistic Buddhism. I think, if possible, can we actually invite Jane on Theravada country, Wollongong, to slightly clarify the question?
Sure. Thanks, Melanie. I don't know. Oh, my camera is on. Okay.
Oh.
I think I was just kind of thinking about, I guess, universal humanism can be, I think, for some cultures, actually a challenging term, a tense term, a term that they would. Sorry, my sister now wants to leave. She's on camera and shy. But I think this idea that of universal humanism, of Buddha nature that exists within all of us, is very central to not just humanistic Buddhism, but to many socially engaged Buddhist traditions. And I wonder if there have been any challenges in various communities that you've studied where they have put forward this proposal of humanistic or universal humanism and have actually received like a pushback or resistance to it. So that was just my question. Sorry, it was maybe very too academically worded.
Feel free to jump in, panelists.
Well, I think one thing that's important to make the question even more complicated is we have to be aware of the definitions, right? Humanism, the term itself, comes, of course, from the European Renaissance. Then Buddha nature is a Mahayana doctrinal term. And of course, the Chinese term for humanistic Buddhism is Buddhism of the human realm, right? Which is linked to the 6 realms of Buddhist cosmology. So that makes it difficult to just compare it to other traditions. It's really depending on how do you apply, how do you define these terms.
If I may share some a personal experience, I guess at times we are caught with defining or debating at the terminology level. If we take a step back and go to the core essence of Buddha nature, it basically just say that everybody has the ability to be awakened, has the ability to be enlightened, has the ability to be compassionate, has the ability to be wise. That itself is, we are giving equality. The term itself suggests equality to everyone. When I start to talk a bit in this way in our outreach events, then they are not caught in the word Buddha nature. They are now swimming in togetherness. Say, oh, what you say is what we want to achieve as well. And then we start to say, okay, then there could be different ways to achieve that, just like different paths to the mountain, right? And in the Buddha's teachings, or analogically termed as 84,000 teachings, they're just different medicines for the different kind of situations that we're in. Just a very simple example, I went to a chemist. I'm a sufferer of hay fever, very serious hay fever. So I picked this particular brand. It doesn't work for me. So I have to change another brand. Oh, it works perfectly for me. And recently I discovered a spray that works even better for me. So I guess in that sense, humanity has the right of choice to pick whatever practices that best resonate with their karmic inclinations at any point in time. But fundamentally, what the message we are delivering is that we can all be awakened, we can all be compassionate, we can all be wise together. And that's what I meant by the light that shines together, while the sources and batteries or whatsoever can be different.
Thank you very much. I found that there's different analogies towards this, the universal teaching. Also sinking at the bottom of the ocean, because it's also part of the light as well, where the calmness is. We have a lot of questions. A lot of questions we need to ask for clarification. So maybe I will try to invite the participant to explain a bit your question. Maybe I would like to invite Deb Carr. You have some very good questions. Is Deb here? Hi, Deb. You have a question for Jonathan. Hi, Deb.
Hi, sorry, I was listening and cooking. So sorry.
Excellent.
I was just really echoing your question, and because my life, I move around all the time. Before COVID, it was internationally, but now I live in a caravan and I move from state to state. I'm really interested to see how it was a cultural question. When people move from culture to culture and that experience of moving between, is it eventually going to dilute the construct of culture as a collective identity? And in terms translating that around Buddhism, will it eventually not be, will there be no collective identity? And is that important?
So it seems more like a Jonathan question for this one.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And that sounds like a very interesting lifestyle. I've always wanted to have a camper van and spend some time traveling around and getting up in the morning and deciding where to go. The notion of culture. Sorry?
Left or right, it's great.
So the notion of culture is very interesting, and it's understood in different ways. The term originated from agricultural metaphors for self-development. The idea that when somebody is educated to become a kind of civilized human being, it's like tending a seed. So it's very similar to Chinese notions of self-cultivation, care, and bringing somebody up. And that came to be pluralized in European thought as Europeans began to encounter and began to respect more other cultures. So, for example, as they began to learn about ancient literature from South Asia, they began to think, well, maybe there's not one civilization, one kind of culture that you get more and more of, but maybe there are multiple cultures. And so that from that time, the notion of culture has existed in this binary way. It's either the idea of having some culture, more or less of it, that you're enculturated into a whole set of practices, literature, beliefs, values, or on the other hand, it's a multiple thing that exists in different places in the world, and and we encounter in our daily lives maybe a number of different cultures. So I think the second sense is a bit problematic because it gives us this idea that culture is a kind of silo, that you grow up, for example, in so-called Western culture or Asian culture or Chinese culture or whatever, and that forms you entirely. So in the middle of the 20th century, a lot of social scientists put really a lot of emphasis on that idea of different cultural. There was a movement called the Culture and Personality School that really said, well, people's personalities are entirely formed by their cultural upbringing, that gives them their values. And but to me, that has never seemed realistic, because the boundaries between these supposed cultures have always been very fluid, and they've probably never been more fluid than now, but they've always been fluid. So I think Fo Guangshan has a very good way of thinking about this. When you think about the 5 harmonies, for example, Master Xingyun and Fo Guangshan emphasize the way in which cultivation works at the individual level, within the family, within society, within a nation, for example, and also within the international community. So I I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we have this idea that globalization is new, and that we all used to live in siloed societies with our different cultures, and suddenly in the 1980s or the 1990s, we started moving around and encountering each other, and we're going to lose something. But I don't believe that's the case at all. I think we've always had training and cultivation at different levels of scale, and we'll continue to have that. So I hope that answers your question, but no, I don't think it's a problem.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. If I use the very limited Buddhist knowledge I have, or Buddhist learning I have, culture can be seen as a set of attachments to certain rules. And if we remove that attachment away, we keep co-creating new type of cultures. And as Joey pointed out, the emptiness, the kind of the concept of emptiness is really nothing. We can always detach from things, and we can form new things. So if you look at from the attachment point of view, it's not no big deal to keep evolving in a way, right? And actually go back to the what this panel is about, is adaptation as well. So thank you very much for such a wonderful question, Deb, and a wonderful insight, Jonathan. I think we can have one more question, and here I have, and also I see a lot of questions chat channel. We won't be able to get to all of them, so but I think you can always find our panelists later. You can email them and ask the questions after the session. The final one, I would like to invite Doreen Fang, who have asked a question about Buddha's teaching. Is Doreen here? So may I ask, invite Doreen to share your question with us?
Yeah. So I'm really interested to know how humanistic Buddhism is just viewed across the world by different people, whether it's a modern branch of Buddhism or a revamp of the Buddha's teaching, or whether it's a philosophy rather than a religion. And I think my second part of the question sort of like related to previously one of the other questions about, you know, the globalization and localization, whether we may sort of like lose or become a bit selective in some of the teachings that we choose to propagate. For example, like in Buddhism, we have the 6 realms, but we don't talk much about the hell or the hungry ghosts or the asura to the wider world, whether this is to facilitate acceptance. So yeah, it would
Thank you very much, Doreen.
For your comment in advance.
Yeah, I think it's a very deep one. This involves multiple questions, so I would just invite our panelists to jump in to comment on whatever point that you resonate with or you would like to respond. Yes, Melanie.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think part of your questions is a bit related to my personal research. I think because I recently conducted new research about how Chinese Buddhism developed and developed in Theravada tradition, such like Myanmar and Thailand. I think this kind of topic is really relevant to your question. I think because we know that the Theravada tradition and the Mahayana tradition are quite different, with different practice, different doctrine. And we know from the Buddhist history, these two traditions are quite are not very not very harmonious between these two traditions. And so from my personal research data, I can share some of local Burmese Chinese practice and view about how to communicate these two different traditions together, because there is some kind of long-term conflict between these two traditions. And I think that the local Mahayana Buddhists, they try their best to communicate with local Theravada Buddhists, and I think they try their best. They want to respect local culture and localize some kind of local practice. I can give you one example, such like the rule of fasting after midday. Because in Taiwan and in many China, most Chinese Buddhists, they take this rule more flexible. But in local custom, local people and local Buddhist monks, they keep this rule very rigid. So if Chinese Buddhist monks, they want to be respected by local people, they need to localize this practice instead of eating dinner somewhere outside the temple. Otherwise, it will annoy the local people. So what I want to mention that is that when we want to propagate Chinese Buddhism outside the Mahayana Buddhist territory, we need to respect local tradition and try also keep flexibility in our own practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melody, especially for using your own research and real examples to share with us. The examples are super powerful. I think we are now coming to the end of the session. So to recap today, the title of the panel is Revaluing Buddhist Adaptation in the Modern World. I think we all agree that adaptation is nothing to be afraid of if we hold true to the universal teaching. Also, we're adapting. We are in a video conferencing together and to discuss this very old tradition. I think what we have found is that formats can always change, but we are here, actually we're practicing what Buddha has taught us, the connection, to share the kindness with each other. So thank you very much. I think this panel itself is sort of already, the action itself is an answer also to the panel title. So now I would like to invite everyone and thank you to all the panelists again for sharing with us not just your research, but also your personal stories and insights. That's very moving. And thank you for all the, Joey, for the instant poems that you have shared with us. And wonderful examples from Jonathan's social perspective, and Jens a very deep insight from his research, and Melody for all your examples. And thank you all the participants for very generously sharing with us your insight. And there's a lot of questions keep coming. I think the questions themselves are not just questions, they're also comments as well to inspire us. I understand that we're all very busy, but the busier we are, the more we will need these moments to connect and to explore how we continue into the future. So I think we will call it a panel for now, exactly 1 minute after 6. And I would love to keep connecting with all of you, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and yeah, I would love to keep learning from all of you. Thank you very much, panelists.